Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to part 1 of this exam prep session on PL-600, Microsoft Power Platform Solution Architect. I'm Monica from TechnoFocus, and I will be serving as your moderator today. We're glad to have Nicolas Georgiou with us, who will be presenting today's session. He is a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer on Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. He is currently based in Canada. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to our presenter. Nicolas, the floor is yours now.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicolas Georgiou from TechnoFocus. And today we're going to talk about the PL-600, which is Microsoft Power Platform Solution Architect certification. So my name is Nicolas Georgiou. I'm an MVP on Office Server and Services. Also an MCT on various topics, and specifically on Dynamics 365 and everything around the Power Platform. So let's jump into the content. So our agenda will be what it takes to become a solution architect. We will also talk about conceptualized design and talk about project governance and working as a team. Also, we will cover very quickly the Power Platform architecture overview and talk more in detail about what is data modeling, analytics, and artificial intelligence. Of course, we need to talk about this now. It's part of the Power Platform. We will cover the Power Apps architecture in general. Also talk about ALM and application lifecycle management, because this is super important for PL-600. So this objective of this course is it will let you identify what will be covered on the exam, on the certification, determine which concept to prioritize to further study, gather some potential tips useful for the exam, explain the different potential exam question formats. We will also cover this, and of course, locate available learning resources to utilize for further study and to utilize just to get prepared for the certification. So this is the introduction to the Power Platform Solution Architect Expert content. This certification is the last one of the learning path about Power Platform. So you're probably already aware about all the others certification that are part of this certification path. So you're probably aware that you got the fundamentals, which is the PL-900. It's everything about globally how the Power Platform works. And you maybe already tried to pass the PL-100, which is more focused on how to use Power Apps to build application. The second one, the PL-200, is the one where you will learn more, and the certification will validate that you know everything about the Dataverse and the way to use Dataverse as a functional consultant. The next one, the PL-400, is a bit more complex because you got some developer stuff, code, and this one is about building custom component into the platform, okay? Using Visual Studio and code, external code. So that's the reason why it's focused. It's really focusing on developers. And the DA analyst, even if this one is the DA 100, different than the other one, this one is really focusing on Power BI. So if you want to focus specifically on Power BI, that will be the certification you will have to think about. And the PL-600, which is the one we are talking about today. So when it comes to talk about the Power Platform Solution Architect, the PL-600, the skills that will be measured are perform solution envisioning and requirement analysis, architect a solution, and implement a solution. So these are the three things that will be covered. The skills that will be evaluated during this certification. And when it comes to think about the certification, the first thing you have to do is and the main thing you have to do is to go on the Microsoft official website. From this page, you will get all the details about what is supposed to be covered during this certification. And if you just going down into that page, I love that place. I love this tool. You can just find the ratios of these different skills in the question that will be asked during the certification. And you can even download the exam skills outline, which will be super, super useful when it comes to get prepared for the certification. So here you will find in details what these skills means. I mean, all the skills are detailed right here. And I'm usually using this document and using the highlight feature of my browser, Edge browser, to say, okay, I already covered this. I need to go deeper into this, etc. So I can find here all the different skills and the details that will be evaluated with, again, the ratio. And you will get all the detailed content you need to master in order to take this certification. So this certification is, you can train about this certification following or going into the instructor-led training, which will be a 4-day training where you will work with the trainer and on various exercises to practice about everything that needs to be covered with the PL-600. And it's mainly about ALM, Application Lifecycle Management, and the way it works in the platform. But also the RPA. You are going a bit deeper into the RPA. And if you don't want to go and register for these 4 days, you can just find the free content that is available on Microsoft Learn using aka.ms/learn. You can just find these 2 different learning paths. And if you want to access this module, you can at any time go back into the PL-600 page. And if you're just going right after this skill measured area, you will find the two learning paths that are available about and attached to this PL-600. Okay? So you got everything to get prepared about this certification now. Now let's jump into the technical content, which is starting with becoming a solution architect. What is a solution architect? First of all, a solution architect should have functional and technical knowledge of the Power Platform. But not only. You have to know about Dynamics 365 apps also, and the way they are working together. And of course, all related Microsoft Cloud solutions. So that means Microsoft 365, but also a bit of Azure. You need to understand how it works. A key task of the solution architect is solution envisioning. Especially, this involves looking at the problem and identifying which parts can leverage one of the Dynamics 365 apps and which parts need to be built by leveraging the Microsoft Power Platform or Microsoft Azure. Traditionally, a development-focused architect would start with custom development and low-level Microsoft Azure services. A business application-focused solution architect instead start with Dynamics 365 first and the Microsoft Power Platform, and also use Microsoft Azure to address any gaps. The solution architects leads successfully implementation and focuses on how solutions address the broader business and technical needs of organizations. The solution architect is a key member of the overall project team. In larger organizations, the solution architect will likely work with enterprise architects that focus on the bigger picture. Often, the solution architect will rely on the enterprise architect to ensure the solution being architect fits with the broader organization plan, especially when it comes to integrate with infrastructure, for example. Let's think about the on-premises data gateway, for example, which is not really something coming from the Power Platform, but more from someone else, maybe the infrastructure part. So the solution architect needs to get this big picture to make sure it will connect with everyone. So we will go in detail on collaboration, communication, and problem solving in just a minute. Say a little extra on the other topic list, CAT. But also, you need probably to coordinate all those different works, especially when it comes to, for example, as I said before, work with infrastructure guys. But also about delegation. This is not something directly related to solution architect, but you will have to manage a lot of things, and you will have to think about delegate part of your work. And that will be super important to stay positive, to stay constructive about the feedbacks. You will have to provide a lot of feedbacks about not only the solution itself, but also the process. And you have to build and improve the process internally. This is the role of the architect. So these are the different parts of the job of the solution architect. You will have to cover many different things. You will have to discuss with the customer to align the expectation and define the risk to address. That will be super important to define a risk matrix at the beginning, just to know where you are going. You will have to plan activities aligned with project schedule. You will also have to understand clearly what is the customer project and what are their objectives. But not only, because you got some objectives, you need to define what metrics you will have to measure in order to ensure the success of these different objectives. You have to understand the customer program and governance models. This is super important because you will have to release solutions based on security and based on the way people are working in maybe existing solution. So this part is really very, very important. And as the architect, you are a kind of solution owner, finally. So you have to look at what is already available as governance model and maybe create your own for your solution. So getting some feedbacks from them, for example, from the customers, and plan the roadmap for the next for the different releases, that will be very, very important. You will have to communicate with the customers and with all the different parts of the project. So you have to understand the communication model and information flow, because that will be super important to stay in touch with the decision makers, the sponsors of your project, but also understand how teams are working all together. So that will be super, super important to understand the functional requirements and anticipate about everything about adoption and change management. You have to anticipate at eye level and think about what will be the changes users will have to face when they will use the new solution. And you will have to work with the teams in charge of the change management. But this is on the change part about your solution. But you also have to think about the impact of the new solution, the solution you are releasing with the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure. So that will be super important to anticipate about this. And you need to explain. So you need to communicate the high-level architecture and solution assessment and explain methodology to others. You need to be a real leader in your project and involve users when you need to involve them. And you need to provide them some vision about where they are going with this project. So where we are in the project. These stages are only for helping us in the structure of the conversation and don't imply a strict methodology. In fact, that will depend on the methodology that will be used. And maybe the company or the project itself will impose you, will ask you to apply a specific methodology like Scrum or Agile so these are the different stages. You will get the initiate phase, you will have the analyze phase, of course the design, the moment where you will have to design, implement and deploy. And this is not a linear process. It's kind of loop where you will improve your application in the different releases. So next part is conceptualize the design. So the solution architect role at this point is to lead the discussion to evolve requirement to a level that a concrete solution can be designed. You need to identify the high-level component of the solution, so you need to understand the requirement, but also make a choice in the different requirement based on the money you got or based on the time you have, which is strictly related to the money. So you will have to identify probably the different parts and maybe identify which component will need to be developed, for example, at the very high level. So you need to identify and create boundaries of what is in and out of scope and what integration is required. So here, that's important to have a clear vision about your responsibility in the roadmap of the solution. So everything don't need to be integrated in the first version, but you will have to build this roadmap and you will have to anticipate and identify what will be the different parts and requirement of all these different steps. You need to propose the proof of concept to mitigate risk and or provide needed clarification of proposed approach. Because of course, at the very beginning, you will probably have to validate a couple of things. Feasibility of not, for example. So depending on your solution and where you are going, you will maybe have to run some tests or run some proof of concepts just to validate your approach and explain your approach. Make sure that this approach will be clear. So the good requirements are clear, actionable, feasible, and testable. Because of course, every time you are starting something, you need to make sure that you got the trigger, you got the key you will evaluate just to make sure you will be able to evaluate the success or not of the component. So that's important to understand at the very beginning what will be your test and how you will evaluate if the component is, you are thinking about the component in the right way. Who does the requirement serve? First of all, the people that are sponsoring the project need to understand where you are going. So they need to know if you understand clearly what is the scope of the project and what will be the outcomes. And make sure you will be able to evaluate the different risks that are existing and inherent to any development, any solution. That needs to give a user perspective. So because you will probably use scenarios and user stories to build your system, you will have to define the different personas that will be part of the project. So as users, you will have to define who will be your actors, your users, and the different scenarios you will cover. So that will be clear, and that will let people, for example, in communication or in change management, able to anticipate a bit about what will be the change, the importance of the change for users. And the requirements are supposed to provide solution perspective. So they will let you describe or identify the deployment requirement, for example. That will help you to describe the customer process for deployment and eventually identify any issues or constraints that may influence the solution design. Any factor that may arise relating to the customer production environment or other system with which the solution must interoperate or coexist. So this should include, the integration and interoperability requirement are super important to evaluate all these standards and how they might affect the solution design. So you will have to evaluate the different requirements, and some requirement will be functional and some others will be non-functionals. So a functional requirement is everything about a functional requirement. Something that is supposed to be addressed by the application. Like, for example, as a user, I need to be able to close an opportunity or lost and capture why it was lost, so that we can improve our sales tactics in the future. So as you can see here, they are designed like user stories. So these are the functional requirements, but sometimes even non-functional are explained as a user story. But the non-functional is about everything that is technique or supposed to be addressed by technical team. Like, for example, what will be the availability of the application? And do I need to take care about the high availability requirements? Everything about the compliance, regulatory will be part of the non-functional also. Data retention and residency, if you got some constraint about this. If you got any performance objective about the response time, all these different things will be the requirements will be non-functional. Also, privacy, recovery time, security, and scalability will be non-functional. They are all related to technical part of the solution. And on the other side, the functional are, for example, as a sales manager, I need to be able to approve a discount on a quote. So this is typically a functional requirement, being able to apply a discount. So for example, prevent from closing a batch that has pending item would be a functional consultant, for example. So as a developer, we are using the fit gap analysis. So what is the fit gap analysis? And you will have to think about this when you will go into the certification, because you may have a couple of questions about this. So the fit gap analysis is a process for identifying and documenting gaps between customer needs, the requirements, and the built-in capabilities. So you need to understand clearly what are your built-in capabilities. So that's the reason why you need to understand and know about all these different solutions, and also the Dynamics 365 ones. So this is commonly done with a spreadsheet, but can also be done inline in requirement user stories. And you got tools to do this kind of thing. You got DevOps and all the part that is available about user stories. So this will guide you in blueprinting the solution architect. That will guide you in mapping the requirement to implementation components. So identify the component and make sure you will be able to evaluate if you will need development or not, for example, or if it's provided out of the box because it's just a built-in feature. But you need to map the requirements to the components. So at this part, you will be able to identify at the eye level how requirements will be implemented at the level to allow design implementation teams to finish the detail. And you are supposed to use the diagram to communicate and document the solution and data architecture. You are supposed to provide this documentation. So developing is still a job where you need to document everything, because you know that probably in the future, when the solution will move to the next step or the next version, some of these different requirements will change, and you will at this time, the next team that will develop the version 2 will need to understand why you made this decision before, and you need to identify and execute proof of concept prototype about everything you need to reduce the risk and to help complete the design. So do not start developing do not go deeper into the project without validating the feasibility. This is super, super important. So blueprinting the solution architect, as an example here with a health management solution. So this is the kind of logical diagram you can use to develop the topology, the architecture topology. So this is really just a blueprint. You need to understand what will be the big part of your project. So for example, you will get the intake and responses, adverse event, product complaints, med-info inquiries. You will get the signal detection, risk decision, risk communication. And at the bottom, you got the governance, which is spanning over all these different parts. And on top, you got integrated process and systems, which are spanning through all these different steps too, these different components, sorry. So let's talk about the project governance and the way to work as a team. So solution architect is a kind of solution owner, you know? So this will be the person that will be working with the project manager, or maybe multiple project managers. It will depend on the side of the project, of the solution. But the solution architect owns the overall vision of the technical solution and needs to communicate it to the team, to envision the team. That's super important, to share this vision with them, to make sure they will be able to give you some details or maybe some additional information about technical aspects sometime. So you are like a mentor for other team members. You will work as a mentor. So you need to make sure that they will have enough information to give you some signals about and feedbacks about what they are doing. And maybe sometime technically they will be super, super deep into a specific product, and they can help you. So it's really a win-win connection here. And you have to use these users as mentoree. Solution architect will establish the breakdown that will be used for the functional and technical design. So the team working environment. Multiple people working on the same project. Some may be co-located or dispersed remotely. At this moment, where the pandemic, it's a reality. It's a daily situation. Everyone is working distantly. Most of the people are working distantly, so we'll have to manage this, and you will have to think about this in your development plan. So the development environment typology needs to be determined. Some type of testing environment will be needed. So depending on your test and the different tests you want to practice, maybe you will have to practice and prepare some test data, test set to make sure that developers will be able to work on the data that don't have to think about the privacy of the data, for example. So if you got any specific thing about the data that we use in the application that need to be super secure, you need to make sure you will be able to share some data test or data set that users will be able to use to start developing with. So the Microsoft Power Platform does not provide version control tracking by default. That means that you will have to use something else. So that's the place where you will have to think about using the solutions and the way to release the different solutions. So you will have to think about the ALM process, and that's the place where DevOps will help you. Understanding the environment is super important for an architect. So you need to be familiar with the options that are available into the Power Platform Admin Center. From the environment and the way to manage the environment, so you need to understand the different types of environment that are available, and you need to be proactive in the governance of this environment. That will be crucial when you will try to deliver and start building application based on Power Platform. So the Dataverse database that is associated with an environment is always indicated by when you are just going into the environment, you get the details about the database, the database version. So that will give you an idea about the version of the database that is deployed in this environment. And interesting also is to understand how updates are actually working. So you can see here that the 2021 release wave 2 is available, but not already deployed. So that will be important to understand what will be the process to upgrade this different environment. From, again, the architect perspective, that will be important to understand this because you will probably have to manage the different database, and especially when you will go into the settings right here about the database, where you will have to manage the backup and restore of this database. So that will be important to understand the global features and the way to maintain this different environment. So back to the environment here, you can just see that you got some additional resources that are right here, and you can just go into the analytics right here to see more about Dataverse Power Automate Power Apps, but also have a look to the capacity that is available in resources. In the capacity, you will see that the Dataverse database is not only one database, but it's a block of 3 different things. The database for the records, so called the database, of course. The one to store all the different files, so the place in Azure, the blob storage that will be used to store the file, and also the log, so the capacity of the database that will be used to store the logs. So that's always important to have a look to this. So please, as an architect, again, you need to understand how the environment works. So you have to go into the Power Platform Admin Center, and especially for this certification, you could have some questions about the way to manage this environment and the way to use the Power Platform Admin Center. So please make sure you will have a look to this before going into this certification. So wrapping up, the business application projects are a team effort requiring coordination and planning to succeed. The solution architects are often the glue that holds a team together. Reviewing others' work is an essential part of the solution architect role on the project, and upfront actionable feedback will result in less headache as the project progresses. So one thing about the role again. So the solution architect got the global overview. Usually the different developers or people in the team don't have this vision, but they need to get details about this because they need to understand where they are going. They need to get some vision. especially when you are going into a big team. And sometimes, some people working in a team can react and say, oh, I will be better working on the other team. So this is not your job to manage this, but it's always super interesting to understand that you got in the team someone who knows about something. So that will help you. So it's really a strong connection you will have with your mentorees. It's really a mentor-mentorees connection here. Reviewing others' work. So especially when you got people developing component, for example, it's always very important to review the code. Not only because you need to understand how the code works, but because you have to apply what will be the convention. So I don't know if you have to know at the beginning if there are any convention existing in your company. If there's no convention, naming convention and other kind of convention, you will maybe have to create this convention. And here, it's super important as a solution architect to review if the convention is followed, because that will be one of the key points to release correctly the solution and maintain the solution in the future. So maybe not directly the solution architect, but maybe someone will have the role to review the code of the developers, not the developers themselves. So the Microsoft Power Platform architecture overview. Just to get to remember a couple of things about this different environment. So you are already aware that the Common Data Service is now named Microsoft Dataverse. So Microsoft Dataverse is these database services that are deployed in the Power Platform environment. This Power Platform environment was already used by Dynamics before, and you can deploy multiple environments in the same, attached to the same Azure AD tenant. So when you are creating your Power Platform structure, you are directly connected to the Azure AD tenant. And in this tenant, depending on your licenses, you will have to think about your different environment, depending on your strategy. And you will have to define this strategy. So that will be super important to know if you will deploy multiple environment depending on the region. For example, if you got some specific legal aspect, and you will have to define if you need to get the dev, test, prod, maybe more on each of these development, because maybe the Contoso USA here solution would be a bit different than the Contoso EMEA default solution that is right here. So that will depends if you need to customize a bit the solution. Maybe if you had some customization to the Contoso USA, you will use maybe the same root and the same main component, but some additional component will need to be and to go in dev and test and prod, even in USA and maybe even in Asia, because of the differences of the cultures. So what is an environment and what's not? In an environment, you got Power Apps. This is the only thing you don't have in an environment. But in an environment, you got Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agent, Microsoft Dataverse, and custom connectors. And what is not in the environment, you got Power BI, which is not in the environment. You got any Azure service deployed, which are not part of the environment. You got all non-customers engagement, Dynamics 365 apps, like for example, finance and operation. Of course, you got all the connectors that are available. At this time, this is something like more than 500 system and services. So you got tons of already predefined connectors, but if you need, you can still create your own using the custom connector. And from any third-party REST services, you can just start and build your own connectors. about the Microsoft Dataverse Data Store. So, Dataverse is not only one storage. Dataverse is based on multiple things in the background. First, you got the database capacity, which store and manage relational data. This is stored in Azure SQL database. And more will be probably stored maybe in an evolution of Azure SQL database. We don't know. About the file capacity, so this you have to know that everything about attachment, files, pictures, videos, sounds, all the things are just blob, and they are not stored into the Azure SQL database. They are stored directly in the storage blob, in the account storage that is attached to Dataverse. You cannot go and dig into this storage directly, but it's part of Dataverse. And you got the log capacity, which is the place where the record data changes over time for analysis and reporting purposes. So this is usually stored into the Cosmos DB. So the Cosmos DB here is used to store the logs about Dataverse. So you can see here that Dataverse is not only one database, it's a data system that is based on different services. About the layers of security, you will have questions about security for sure. So you got first the Azure AD conditional access on top, which is your Azure Active Directory coming from the tenant, your tenant. Secondly, you got your environment role. So that would be the different role you will define about people. What role will be available in the environment? So by default, you got the maker, you got the administrator, you got the system, but you can create some additional one at the environment level. Of course, you got all things about resource permission for apps. If you go into Power Apps or Flow or custom connectors, you can define specifically security at this level. So for example, for a Canvas app or this kind of thing. When you share a flow with someone else, this permission will be stored at this level. Of course, after that, you got Dataverse. And in Dataverse, you got these security roles that are available. So you can define all the security roles for your users. And that will be more practical to manage the security from this side when you will think about applying different roles in the application. User roles, that means. And in fifth, you got the cross-tenant inbound and outbound restriction to the hundreds of connector to cloud services, content services, databases, APIs, etc. Of course, you got connection to external services, and that will be also part of the security. So the high availability, leverage Azure if Azure already provides HRDR, no or minimal additional effort is required specifically by the Common Data Service or the Dataverse. And for health check, both black box tests are used to get best coverage. So you got different approaches. Some may use Azure HR feature. Some may use probes to detect failures. Some use work leases. All allow handling internal region failover goals. As an architect, you'll need to know the compliance and data protection that Dynamics 365 platform has to offer, or Power Platform has to offer. In the on-prem world, customer has complete control over their environment. And when you interact with customers for pre-sales or during the implementation, customers could ask questions related to this. So the Trust Center site has complete list of all the certifications, so all industry certification, data and physical security certification, everything will be available on this website. So you got all the ISO, PCI, HIPAA, etc. So even, everything about Europe and even the government requirements, of course. So safe deployment practice. So here is just an introduction about what could be a progressive stage safe deployment strategy. So at the core, you got the Microsoft team, which is extensive integration testing and validation, and solution checker. So these things are already available at the core, proposed and provided by Microsoft. So the station one will be the first release, your first release, the production quality. This is the early view of weekly release and only available for select customers. Okay, so that's the first release, which is the station one. And after that, depending on the updates, you got the standard release and servicing over the station 2, station 3, station 4, 5, and 6, depending on your zone, your area. That means that this is predictable weekly releases, and which will be a hotfix support for critical issues. So that's the way Microsoft is actually releasing their different waves, for example, or hotfixes. Now let's talk about data modeling. So the solution architect role in data modeling is to lead the data model design effort to establish a high-level data architecture for the project. Establish a data model that can be extended by the individual's design teams and communicate the design with the team. And review and provide feedback as the data model evolves during details, design, and solution features. So this is usually we are designing the data model, and we are making regular change on the data model depending on the new features and the new requirements. So it will also depend on the different component and the roadmap. So it will probably depends on your roadmap. You don't need to, at the very beginning, to think about everything, as long as you plan to cover this in the future, in the next version of your application, let's say. Of course, the common data model, which is the base of your Dataverse database. So when you are building this Dataverse database, at first, you got this common data model that is available that offers to standardize your schema. And you have to think about these accelerators that are available for any specific industry. I'm thinking about health, for example. Everything about health, you can just go in GitHub and find the accelerator to provide you some extension to the default common data model that will help you a lot. So what is really good about the CDM is the CDM is coming from Dynamics 365, Dynamics CRM before. So that means that lots of solutions are already using this standard to build their different deployment and development, So the Microsoft Power Platform data architecture. All application is about data. So you need to find a place to store the data correctly. And you got two different places into Power Platform. You got the Dataverse, which is the operational database, and you got the Azure Data Lake. That could be a place where you can store some historical data, for example, and export data that are not used anymore into the operational data into the data lake. So that's implements and use the common data model. And of course, you can access data from the platform through the data connectors. So how you can choose to store, where to store your data and the way to access your data. So the Dataverse is used for transactional data. So you know that when you are building applications are built on filters and queries. So the more you will keep data, even with historical data, for example, that will probably provide, the more you will get data, the less you will get performances. Good performances. So that's the reason why you have to separate things between the transactional data that will stay in your Dataverse and be available for your app, because that will be super light to consume and manipulate. And you will get on the other side the Azure Data Lake that will be good for data from other systems, focused and brought into a common data model structure. So even in the Azure Data Model, you can use the common data model structure to store some data coming from external systems, but also the historical data, what I'm calling historical data. And of course, the connectors that are good for leaving data what it is. So let's say you are using and connecting to an external system. Think about that sometime. This is not because you can connect to a SQL database. You have to, depending on the performance you need to find here and to provide in your application. So these are the different strategies and questions you will have to think about. May I have to use a connector and leave the data where they are? Or maybe do I have to use a data flow to just ingest this data into the data lake, for example? So the data modeling influencer here, the security requirement always push for simplification. But these can drive requirement into the data model. The user experience, it's easy to forget that as we add normalization and relationship, we create new construct users need to navigate to be useful. Data allocation and retention policies, not all data is allowed to be stored. Oftentimes, data from services can't be reached, can't be cached, for example. Companies have internal policies that govern use of data, and some of this data is protected by government law and also has specific requirement for storage, for example, P2, credit card number, and etc. The self-service reporting needs. So if it takes a data architect to navigate the data model, chances are many of the tools from Power BI and export to Excel will be less valuable to the user. Most self-service feature of Microsoft Dataverse allow navigation of one level of relationships. So I was already thinking about and talking about the roadmap. Of course, any existing system that can influence, legacy or not, and any requirement about localization. Are we talking about multi-region, multilingual, multi-currency requirement? So it will depend on this kind of requirement. And to know more about the common data model, you can just go on GitHub and search for the common data model into the Microsoft General Repository. From this CDM repository, you will find the access to the whole entire common data model with all the different tables, all the different entities that are part of the schema. So the idea is to release this open source version of the schema, and it's always good as an architect to get an idea about what kind of information is already predefined in the common data model, because your own data model will be built on top of this pre-existing schema. So when you're just going down into the page, you will find multiple things like entities that are already available, provided by default in the common data model. So you will find all the entities coming from Dynamics 365 CRM, the Insight application, and the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation, which is huge. This one is really huge. This will represent a lot of entities right here. So the basic one is this Dynamics 365 CRM. If you just open this into the CDM entity navigator, That will take some time just to load your entire schema, and we'll find here the different tables that are provided by default when you just create a new Dataverse table. Super interesting to just browse these different entities. So let's say, for example, let's take this account entity right here. So this will load the entity, all the details about the entity, and you will find here all the different attributes for this entity. So you will get all the details here, all the different fields that will be part of this default entity when you will load Dataverse, and you get all the different fields one by one that will give you the source, the data format right here. So that's super interesting and super super important to understand what is the CDM, what it covers, especially when you are not using and you don't want to, you are not ready yet to start building your application into Dataverse. Maybe that could be a good idea just to have a look to this schema, because this schema is open source, so you can just use it whenever you don't want to build a Dataverse database yet. If you want to start by using your own SQL Server, for example, that could be good to just go back into this CDM to see the schema and being able to build in SQL something close to the schema you will use maybe one day when you will upload an update to Dataverse. So super interesting here. Additionally, you can find on this page, I was talking about this industry accelerators. So you can see here that 5 accelerators that are available: the automotive, banking, medical records or health, higher education, and nonprofit. And you can see here that you get some additional entities, additional field table that are available and delivered with this navigator. So you can just go and explore again this specific accelerator, and you can find here all the details. So you got the nonprofit core, which is the one provided by the CRM, and you will get the additional entities that will be provided by this accelerator here. So you will get all these different tables and all these different definition available here. Super interesting and instructive to discover what is the CDM. So choose all of these widely. I mean, about the columns. But regarding number columns, keep the future in mind. Does the column participate in automation as expected? Calculated or roll up to? Once a tab is chosen, you cannot change it. So that's a huge responsibility here. That will have a huge impact on your structure. You can roll up simple calculated columns. For example, calculated columns that include non-deterministic functions cannot be rolled up. And have a discussion about the pros and cons of calculated columns based on it being read-only and only loaded on retrieve. So that's the kind of thing you will have to look at. Analytics and artificial intelligence. The solution architect role again is to evaluate needs from requirement and identify the best approach. Ensure that data models support requirements, and look for opportunity to use proactive insight AI instead of reactive reviewing of report and analytics. You got many different opportunities, AI opportunities in Dynamics. You got some pre-built insights in Dynamics 365. These are the Dynamics 365 Sales Insights, Customer Insights, Market Insights, Virtual Agent for Customer Service, the Custom Service Insights, and the Fraud Detection. And on the other side, you got AI Builder, which is part of the Power Platform, where you can build custom AI, but also use pre-built solutions or models. And on the other side, The third part is everything that is coming from Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services, but not only the cognitive services themselves, but also the Azure Machine Learning, where you can train your own model. So these are some additional tools that you can use to provide custom AI to your system. So Power BI is, as a very quick overview about Power BI. Power BI is a self-service platform allowing users to interact with a pre-made report and create their own visualization. The key advantage of Power BI is the ability to include many data sources as illustrated in the example above. You can have Salesforce, you can have Microsoft Access, Microsoft Excel, SQL database, MailChimp, and of course Dynamics 365. So all these different sources can be crawled and integrated into reports. Working with Microsoft Dataverse data. So these are the areas that need attention when it comes to use Microsoft Dataverse data. So everything is in context of using Dataverse data. So clean and transform the data modeling. Make it easier to consume the data. Think about the cleanup and transforms. Data alert from Power BI. So these are all the alerts that can be set and become a trigger for an automation. So you can transform these Power BI dashboard tiles into actionable items. It's only available from Power BI dashboard, of course, and only from some charts like tile, KPI tile, and Gauge tile. But this is really a great way to integrate with Power Automate and start triggering some action. The different cognitive services that are available, you probably already heard about the family, the Azure Cognitive Services family. So this is a family of AI services and cognitive API to help developers build more intelligent apps. And they are providing everything about decisions, the ability to predict and take a decision. So you get all about the language and all the different services that are used to understand the language using, for example, language understanding engine, the speech and the way to transform speech to text, but also text to speech, and improve the capability to understand using the language and the natural language processing. Vision, all about analyzing pictures or recognizing objects in the picture, count the number of objects in the picture, not only a picture, but also in a video if required. And everything about the web search. So the search can be used in, for example, to build this knowledge network in your company. So everything about the skills and the way to build the skills directory in your company. So search is it's more than just search for documents, for example. This is way more important, way more advanced than just browsing documents. Here, you can just, from your own entire documentation and data from database, you can build and manage the different skills that are available in your company and attached to different users. So the Power Apps architecture. Of course, you know that you got three different kinds of Power Apps. You got the Canvas app, which is a way to start from a blank page, and the only way to go and connect directly to different data sources than Dataverse. By default, others option will be directly connected to Dataverse. The second one is the model-driven application. Of course, this one is directly connected to Dataverse because it will use the Dataverse data model to build an application. And the third one, Portal, is built on top of Dataverse. It's a kind of WordPress, but a kind of WordPress with an easy way to manage the different pages and integrate content coming from Dataverse. Okay, so at any time, if you want to integrate external data into model-driven application and portal, you will have to first import this data into Dataverse before being able to display this data into these applications. Canvas is, of course, different. So usually the best thing is to start with the model-driven. So if you need to start with the model-driven, of course, this is a kind of experience where you just have to stay focused on the data model first and use the data model. So you will be able to use the different forms that would be available to access these different tables and data that are available into tables. You will be able to manage the different views that will let you manage the different kind of galleries that will query the database and provide you some results. So the views will display a list of results coming from the database, where the form will let you display information about one record. Of course, it's security trimmed, so you don't have to do anything about the UI. The UI is already proposed by the interface, so the modern interface that is available and provided by model-driven application, which is already used by Dynamics 365 application. So Microsoft already modernized the Dynamics 365 application using this model-driven applications and this model-driven model. So that's the reason why this model-driven application will look like Dynamics 365 application a lot. When you start with Canvas, this is not Microsoft Dataverse data driven. So that means that you can connect to any kind of data. It's super interesting because you can connect to, for example, SharePoint or even an Excel file. Of course, you can use the Canvas to easily integrate this application into SharePoint and Teams. So that's super easy to embed this application into SharePoint. So if you need to modernize a portal, for example, a portal you are designing in SharePoint, sometimes instead of developing an application using SPFX, you can think about using Canvas application just to modernize or to get modernized some part of your intranet. The big advantage, disadvantage of the Canvas is you start from a blank page. That means that it's a pixel perfect blank canvas where you will have to design the whole entire application by your own. So that's super cool because you can create some crazy design in your application. But on the other side, you will have to code everything. You will have to manage this entire design phase in your application. Portals. So these portals are Dataverse data driven. That means that the data is coming from Dataverse. And you got two different things. You got first the tables in Dataverse that are used to make the portal works. Okay? So it's like a WordPress again. So you got this part where all the settings, all the informations about the portal itself and the way the portal works, the pages and all the content and all these different things are stored into the Dataverse. Okay? And you got also all the different Dataverse table or information you want to surface in the portal. So this information need to be stored also into Dataverse. But we are using component in the portal to display and integrate easily these different lists or forms in our pages. Of course, this portal can be customized with standard web technologies like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and etc. The different types of component. You are already aware that you got on one side the Canvas component, so you can build a component library in Canvas where you can store all the components that can be reused through all the different applications in the company, and you can start designing new application based on this component library. So this is targeted for Canvas application makers and works only with an in-Canvas application. And on the other side, when you need to integrate component into model-driven application or portal, you can use the PCF, the Power Apps Component Framework, which is targeted for professional developers to build. Works in model-driven apps today and in preview for Canvas apps. So this is super interesting because it's actually in preview, also in Canvas. The Power Apps portal architecture is a bit different. So the way the portal is built, we are using the Dataverse, which is still called the Common Data Service here, but this is Dataverse. So we got the CDS data that is available, we got the views, and we got the forms. And of course, as I said before, you got all the features and the way the portal is actually designed in specific tables, but also you can use data coming from Dataverse to expose some content and add some content into the portal. So you can use entity views and you can use entity forms to add and to integrate some features into your portal. The portal visitors can access portal as either anonymous and authenticated users, which is super, super interesting because this is the only kind of application that allow this. And the reason why it's possible is because the CDS portal got its own security layer. It got its own security model. Of course, you can rely on authentication. So you got many different ways to authenticate your users. But when the user is authenticated, the next step is to apply some security on this user, even about the anonymous user. So that's the reason why you got this secured content that is secured by its own system here. You got the granular read, write, create, delete features and all the different actions that users can do. You got the record level security, which is at the list and form level, where you will be able to define what part of the Dataverse table will be available or not to the different users based on the different roles they are using. So we are using here some web roles, okay, which is just another security layer. Let's talk now about ALM, Application Lifecycle Management. So, the role of the solution architect in ALM. He will be in charge of leading the establishment of the Application Lifecycle Management Plan. He will need to evaluate and determine the amount of sophistication of the ALM that is appropriate for the project. And he will work with the various teams to support their effort in implement and execute the plan, which is not that easy. So, the Power Platform vision for ALM. As a quick start, you can enable App Builder to get set up with an environment with the latest build and connect to source control and make a change quickly. About the build, you can simplify tooling, consolidate, and this is the vision, and consolidate the portals and speed up inner loop. Enable an automated repeatable deployment methodology. Manage, and they are investing in additional environment management capabilities to offer more flexibility for app builders to use and depose pre-configured environment as needed. And the last, monitor, of course, application telemetry and feedback loops by design. So some key solution architect ALM consideration. The environment strategy. How many, what they propose, okay? So do you have to manage the dev, test, production, how many tests the environment I need, what will be the data that will be used in this test environment, etc. The source control, where will the master copy of the solution and code live? So for example, GitHub, that maybe. But I don't know, maybe you got some restriction about this. DevOps, what is the workflow for app builder? What is the pipeline? And who and how will promote the app on its journey from dev to production? And of course, the deployment configuration, how to configure each environment and what can be done to make this easier. So the solution architect should establish the workflow for how app builders will make changes and promote them. That need to be super clear. You need to communicate and work on assignment that should be managed to minimize the conflict. The shared app building environment can be less complex but doesn't offer isolation between app builders and lack detailed tracking and changes. So that will be one of the decisions you will have to take. And on the other side, individual app building environment offer isolation and tracking, but require extra effort to merge work and resolve conflicts when it's time to merge your deployment. The promote to production. The solution architect lead the effort to define the process for all changes will be promoted from dev to production. This includes defining the number of stages from dev, test, production, as well as the process to do the promotion regardless if manual or automated. And Microsoft is building tools to support doing this with Azure DevOps using continuous integration, the CI, and continuous deployment, which is the CD. So my recommendation here is, and usually we need to do first things manually. So just define this manually on the whiteboard, and after you will find what will be the way to automate, the way to start automating this. So the Azure DevOps. You got 5 different tools in Azure DevOps, not only one. You got the boards that will let you plan, track, and discuss work across your teams. You got the pipelines that use to automate CI, continuous integration, and continuous deployment builds and releases. You got, of course, the repos. That will be the source control to store and track changes. And additionally, you got your test plan that will let you plan, execute, and track scripted tests. And the last is the published solution, the artifact that will let published solution built by build pipeline. So using the pipeline, using the Azure pipelines. Build pipelines can be used to create dev environment from scratch. So you can start by creating your environment first. Commit changes from dev to source control to commit all the changes. It can run the solution checker. It can automate test, various tests, and it can be used to build output solution from source control as a managed or unmanaged solution. Release pipeline can be used to take solution from build pipeline and deploy them to one or more test prod environment. It can be used to perform automated testing as part of release process. And it can be used to pause for approval before progressing to next environment, of course. So you can really automate the whole entire thing using the pipeline. So as an example here, you got an example of ALM here. So you have to initiate first. So here, you have to provision the environment, deploy the dependencies, pack source code from repo, and import solution. So that is the initial build pipeline, instantiate development environment daily. Okay? The second one is the build, where you will be able to run the unit test, run the solution checker, export the solution, and unpack the repo, which is here, build the pipeline, automate manual steps, no more upload to solution checker and manual export solution, unpack and push to repo. That will do the job for you. And the last one is the release, where you will have to run a couple of maybe additional tests. So the first one will be the unit test, of course, the pack solution. So you will have to pack the solution that have been unpacked before, run again the solution checker, run integration test, import as unmanaged, increment version, and export to managed. So that would be the automated release pipeline that will remove all manual steps. Weekly, daily, hourly release become the new standard. I will just go and show you very, very quickly what it looks like. So I got here my first environment, which is, let's say, my personal environment, which is my user environment. You know, this one is a developer environment. And in this environment, I got a solution called Contoso Device Order Management, which name is Contoso Device Order Management here. So this solution is available in my dev environment as unmanaged. So the second environment I will have will be the production environment, which is the trial environment. And here I will need to deploy the solution. And as you can see, I already deployed the solution before. And this solution is deployed as a managed solution. So this is what I need to do automatically. So instead of doing this manually between my environment, I need to do this automatically. And that's the reason why I will use my DevOps environment. So the first thing will be to create my repo. In my repo, I will use the GitHub repo, the Git repo that is integrated into Azure DevOps, and I will use this to unpack my application. So you can see all my artifacts, application artifacts are available in my repo right here. So that is my repo in Azure DevOps. The second thing is I will have to create my pipelines. And in my pipelines, in my example here, I got two different pipelines. The first one is the one that will be used to export the solution from dev and store this solution into the repo. And to do this, it will need to unpack the solution. So I will edit this pipeline. And as you can see here, I just use the Power Platform tools that are available. So you can just go into the marketplace and add for free the Power Platform tool into your DevOps. So here, the first thing in this pipeline is to deploy the tools. I need to use the Power Platform tools, so I need to deploy them. The second thing is I need to export the solution. So here, I'm exporting the solution into a file. So I'm exporting the solution as a solution file, as a zip file. Okay? And I'm not exporting this as a managed solution. But just in case, I will export this solution also as a managed solution. And here I will store this file, this solution, as a managed solution. So the next step will be I will unpack the unmanaged solution. So I will use the unmanaged solution I exported before, and I will unpack this zip file into my repository. So this is my first pipeline here. And the last thing here, I'm just running a couple of lines just to make sure that I will check and I will commit all the changes. So just to make sure that all the changes will be committed. So that is my first step, my first pipeline. From dev, I will export all the changes into my repository. Okay. Of course, I got some variables here, so maybe you pay attention to this. The solution name is right here. The name of the solution is just right here. And by the way, this is the exercise you will have to play with when you will go into the PL-600 instruction-led training. So my second pipeline, so I will go back into the pipelines right here, And my second pipeline will be, I need now to build my managed solution and deploy this managed solution into my production environment. So here, I will go and edit this second pipeline. And this one is pretty simple. Also, again, I need to deploy the tools. I need to pack the solution. So I need to just pack here the solution and make sure this solution will be stored into my managed zip. And I need to publish the pipeline artifact. So I just need to publish it in my environment. So that's it. This is the only thing I have to do. So using these two very simple pipeline, I can just release an application from dev to production. And I can, of course, do exactly the same thing to release first in test and add another step right after that to manage the deployment to production, of course. So this is the way it works. Of course, before you have to manage the different connectors. So you have to think about the different service connections you get right here to connect to your dev environment or to your prod environment. And that's it. So you can just look at this pipeline, run this pipeline, and after that you can just go back to the releases and go and find the new releases pipeline. So you can just edit this release, and here you can build the test that will run to integrate the application. So the artifact will be this solution that will be available. So this is the built managed solution that is available. We will take the latest version and we will deploy this into test. So this is the kind of thing you can just do into DevOps, and you need to understand how it works in order to understand the ALM that is proposed by default by Microsoft. So about alternative automation tools. So the CDS and admin API can be used to automate from any supported language. So if you want to do things without DevOps, you can. You can direct PowerShell. You can use direct PowerShell to build tasks for more control. And you can use Power Automate with some platform admin connector to automate deployment. So that's the point where Microsoft is actually investing a lot of time on these Power Automate admin connectors that will let you manage the different artifacts in the platform without getting an access to the application itself. So using the admin connector, you can manage some admin actions without getting an access to the data or to the application itself. Super, super useful. So you can easily understand that first you have to develop your environment strategy. So you have to organize what will be your strategy about the environment. So you got different environment. Do I need to use my personal environment, my personal maker, or do I need to use a shared environment to store all my development? So this is typically some decision that need to be discussed and defined as a strategy. And it will totally depend on the kind of project you got. So that is super important to define your strategy and make sure that everyone understands your strategy about this. Understand your strategy about the repos also. The way you will organize the repos, the main branches, the way you will branch the application and store your different versions. The solution overview. The solution are a container to track the changes you make to the Dataverse, Power Apps, and Power Automate flows, but also Power Virtual Agent. So the solutions are how you transport and install change into target environment. So you already know that we are using this solution to move all our part from environment to another one. Okay? And that's exactly what I shown you with the A&M before when I used managed versus unmanaged to move the application. Of course, the unmanaged is used during development and used to transport to other development environment. It's always very important to keep a trace of all your managed application as unmanaged. Because if you, for example, destroy or a development environment or start from scratch on a brand new dev environment, you will need to deploy your solution in a deployment version. So the unmanaged will be super important. And the managed will be the one that will be used to distribute to non-development environment. The solution layering. So here you can see that the layering occurs on import of managed solution. The layers describe the dependency chain of component from the root solution introducing it through each solution that extends or changes the component behaviors. So I don't know if you already use this, but you know that you need to understand the different options around the solution, the different opportunities you've got about upgrade, about hotfix, about, you need to define a strategy about this, and even about the branching, the way to create some dependencies between your solution. So that would be super important to get a clear vision about this. So if you never looked at all these different features about the solution, you need to, because you will have some question about this. So layers are created through extension of an existing component, taking a dependency on it, or through creation of a new component or version of a solution. So that's very important to understand the way all these solutions can interact each others. So defining the solution structure, one or more custom solutions should be created that contain the project assets. Create a solution publisher and use it for all solutions. So that's super important, this part, because it's part of the convention I was talking about. You need to use the same publisher because you will probably have to use some prefix, and the prefix are attached to the publisher. So even if you are using multiple environments, you need to make sure that people will use the same publisher to start developing their part. Don't use the default publisher or default solution, please. The Common Data Service default solution is not a place where you have to store anything. Okay? Even if you are designing a Power Virtual Agent from scratch and using by default the Common Data Service default solution, you have to go back to the solution, create your own, and start using this solution to store your artifact, your different work. Once defined, the solution architect should communicate and ensure teams follow structure, follow the convention. So you will have to ensure that everyone will follow the convention, and that will be important, that you will be responsible for the convention to be maintained. So that is super important to review the code that is released, the way people are deploying and releasing the different tables in Dataverse and etc. So that will be super important to keep this consolidate, and hope to see you for the next one.
Thanks for such an informative part 1 of this session. I hope our participants will really benefit from it. Don't forget to join us for the remaining 2 parts of this series to complete your exam prep on PL-600, Microsoft Power Platform Solution Architect. So we'll see you in the next part of this series. Bye!